Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for November 20th, 2020. Currently on the line are me, Benji Fisher, one of the co-maintainers of the migration system. We have Christina Chumias, the lead of the usability initiative and the admin UI and JavaScript modernization initiative, and Lowry Escola, the front-end framework manager and maintainer of the theme API. To get started this meeting, let me share one of my screens. So we have the issue for today's meeting. Is that showing now?
Yep.
Good. And just a few quick things I wanted to point out. These two issues in green. Oh, the issue for today's meeting is 318-2480. And a couple of things that are already RTBC. We don't need to provide any feedback on them. But one is 308-9525. That sort options should correspond to bundles selected for entity field reference settings. Let me just demonstrate that. Here I have a clean install of Drupal 9.2. I'm editing the configuration for the article content type, and I want to add an entity reference field. And you can see by the autocomplete that I've done this before. And so on one of these configuration pages, when I get to configure what content types this reference will refer to, this is the standard profile. So I currently just have two options. If I choose article, then I have this sort by field, and I can choose, among other things, I could sort by the image title. It's a strange use case, but it's one of the options. But then I change my mind, and instead of referencing articles, I want to sort by basic page, and that image is still an option, even though the basic page content type doesn't have an image field. And that will be fixed once that issue I mentioned is committed. So that's one little win. Another very small win is when I go to the page to add a view, and I guess this is related to issue 318-3106, which is also RTBC. Most of the views that I make are going to be views of content, so it's nice that the default is content. But sometimes I want to make a view of custom blocks or paragraphs or something else. And you may notice that this list is not sorted. I don't know what determines the order, but it's thanks to the work that Jennifer Hodgson did year and a half ago, it's just a one-line change to make this a sorted list. And so I finally got around to creating that issue, and less than 3 hours later, someone had posted a patch to it, and now it's RTBC. So as soon as that issue is committed, this list will be sorted alphabetically. So those are just a couple of small wins that I thought we could call out. So I see Ofer Shal has joined us. Thank you. And let me stop sharing my screen. And Lowry, can you take over? And I think you have something about the Olivero theme that you want to show to the meeting.
Yes. So there is an issue open against Olivero. The issue number is 317 7475. Actually, let me share my screen at the same time. And the motivation of the issue is that there are certain instances where there could be extremely long words that could be longer than the space that is reserved for the element. So it's that leads into a scenario where we might have to have some kind of strategy how we want to break those words into new lines in a kind of forcible manner. And so I have an example of that here. And I have one very long word as part of the text here. So you can see that it's rendered below the recipes on the link, which makes it very difficult to read. So let me apply the patch. And let's see what this does. So it basically turns on the word break word, which makes the browser to break the word if it's too long. I think let's see the specific. We can see the specific explanation here. So
it says word break word is deprecated.
Yeah, it seems slap. Has the same effect as word break normal. Interesting. So I'm wondering if this has any impact then, if it has the word break.
I think they're talking about word break and break word as two different things.
Yeah, but word break has a property of break word.
Okay.
And that's what they are using here. Oh, I see. It's a word wrap. I'm wondering what is the other one. That's more in the code. No. Overflow wrap. Probably was. Oh yeah. So here we can see. So basically, the word wrap seems to be some old property introduced by Microsoft in Internet Explorer. So we should be probably using the overflow wrap. Let's actually see, because this might be just, if you look at the post CSS, it's using just word wrap here. It seems like it's being compiled into something else. But we can assume that it's an overflow break word that they are trying to do there. And regardless of the method, it basically allows unbreakable words to be broken at arbitrary points if there are no otherwise acceptable breakpoints in the line. But soft wrap opportunities introduced by the word break are not considered while calculating min content intrinsic sizes. So basically what happens is that, let me copy and paste this, is that at an arbitrary point, the text will be split into multiple lines. So you can see here. And for example, so I think this is very language specific, whether this makes sense or not. And I don't know, maybe in some other language, this might make sense. And in another language, it might be actually something that doesn't make quite as much sense. So I'm wondering if there's any UX best practice for handling these types of situations, or if we should be even be doing anything in regards to this, given that how much of an edge case it is to have this long word.
Yeah, have you tried German words? No, but apart from that, I worked on a project where we did something like that, and then the site for Japan, they complained that the way the words were breaking were odd. I'm not really sure what consequences really mean, so I'm not really sure if it's that bad. But yeah, I don't know if it's really something that we need to fix, or actually, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the same concern that I had. So, for example, in Thai language, there are like instead of them reading individual characters, they would be reading clusters of characters. So breaking up words at random points could make it very difficult to read.
Yeah, especially the problem is that you're not getting here any dash anywhere, so you really don't know that the word is broken.
Yeah. And
so,
what I also know is that in Finnish, we have different kinds of rules, like how you are supposed to split, because we have similar rules that words are read in clusters. So you are supposed to break it in between those clusters. And the default behavior of like if you use the overflow wrap break word, it doesn't appreciate those rules.
I see.
Out of curiosity, what happens if you double click? Does the whole word get selected?
So that's a crazy rating appraisal.
Here's a.
That's nice.
Yeah, so it does.
So, as I said, that was just out of curiosity, because I don't want to even try to override the browser's decision on what happens there. I'm glad that the browser does that. But if it didn't, I wouldn't try to fix it. And that same thing applies to the hyphenation. I agree with Christina. It's a bad thing that there's no hyphen inserted there. But I think we should let the browser fix that. I don't think we should try to override the browser's decision on whether to put in hyphens.
Agreed.
So I'm testing with some Thai script right now.
The hyphens aren't another CSS attribute? Like whether to add hyphens or not?
Ah.
The auto one seems to know the language preferences according to that documentation you opened.
Yeah. I'm just gonna complete my test on this. How does it break with this?
You know, a little bit of history. Before there was ever HTML, there was Tech, and designed for typesetting. And among other things, it included a hyphenation algorithm. And you know, people who don't know better assume that to do hyphenations, you need huge tables of words and where hyphens can be inserted. But in fact, Donald Knuth came up with an algorithm that is really, really good at determining where the hyphen goes. In English, there are a very small number of exceptions where the algorithm doesn't work. And I think the same algorithm applies in most languages, although some will have more exceptions than others.
So I'm just testing the overflow wrap break word with Thai, and it seems to be working as it's supposed to. So it is not breaking in between characters. So for example, here you can see this is a cluster. So it wouldn't split that into 2 rows, even though I have the break word applied.
So it respects languages preferences then?
At least on Chrome.
Ah,
Right.
But I don't know how would that work on other languages. I mean, other browsers.
What's the default value for the hyphenation option?
It seems to be none.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or is it auto? Let's see.
okay, so they are not specified for what I understand. Initial value manual, so they are not specified, I guess.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I guess we should consider that if we're going to change the word wrap, then we should also consider whether we should change hyphens to auto.
Yes.
Mhm.
And what is the browser support of this?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's depends on the language. It seems like on, but it seems
But maybe this is Firefox specification, or
so it's different languages in different browsers. So it seems English has a pretty good support across the browsers that are listed here, but then other browsers are not doing.
no.
Okay, but again, our job is to supply the correct CSS, and the browser's job is to implement it.
Yes, but
It's progressive enhancement, and
Yeah.
presumably support for it will improve over time.
Yeah, but we are avoiding the fact that we are making a decision over content, that it's a visual thing. So we are basing our decision on a visual problem, and that is changing the content or how the content is displayed. So we are kind of deciding.
so I don't think it's only a visual problem because it could lead into
Yeah, that's right.
context not being legible. So yeah, it's not purely visual. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't know this. That's cool.
Yeah, it is just that it's the browser support is not great. So if it's something else in English, then seems like Safari and Firefox and are the pretty much only ones supported. But yeah. So I think my question was, so I think that was a good point brought up, that we should probably consider the usage of hyphens at the same time. But do we think that this is an improvement? Do we think that this is going in the right direction? Was, I guess, the first decision to make. Do we think that it's an improvement?
I think if it's for the front end thing, where at the end the owner of that is the site owner or whatever, it makes sense because they can change that. But doing that for the admin, the UI, I wouldn't agree. But for the front end thing, makes sense. I'm not against it. Let's say it like that.
Ofer, your opinion?
Sorry, I was muted. I I think it's a good addition to add the word breaking and the hyphens, and whatever the browser can help support, that's up to the browser.
Yeah, I agree. I think from a strict usability perspective, which is our purview, the main point is that if you are going to break a word, then you should have some indication that the word has been broken, and that would be the hyphen. So I guess I feel strongly that if we're going to break words, we should hyphenate them as well as the browser allows us to. And it's not, I'm not sure it's strictly usability question, but to the extent that it is, I think that it's good to keep the content within the container.
Okay, it seems like we agree that it's going to the right direction. We should probably expand it to provide a value for the hyphens property as well, so that we get hyphenation.
Yes.
And once we have that, then we should be done with Olivero. Should we open this issue against other teams to make sure that other teams are compatible or are following similar pattern? So basically, that would be Umami and Bardic.
That seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I would say Umami and Bardic probably are the ones.
Right. Yeah, so
and also it's out of scope for this issue, so I would suggest opening another issue. But we did notice the word break property had the value of word break, which was deprecated.
I now remember something that I saw in Umami, and is directly connected to this. When I was working on Layout Builder in Umami, one of the preview modes of Layout Builder gives you very, very long words on like certain fields. And these words are always super long and breaking the whole theme. So that would be a perfect solution where even Layout Builder preview, that's something that other people might see as well. That I don't know why, but it like creates its own demo text and things. So a very long line breaking nicely would be very useful.
So I agree that we need to look into the very specific mechanics of how we also, like, which property are we supposed to use. And I believe that it's supposed to be overflow wrap that we are using. We do have a polyfill to convert that into something that is supported by 11, because I don't think or it does, maybe it does support that.
Yeah, so
Right, it supports break word, but it doesn't support anywhere. But we don't want to use it anywhere.
Yes, yeah. So maybe we can use the overflow wrap then.
And maybe that is part of this issue. It looked like that was being added in this patch, if I read correctly.
Yeah.
Like line 140, for example.
Yeah, I would say so also.
Okay, so that is part of the same issue.
Yep. Okay, I think we are done with this topic then.
It was good that I did that because I could get deeper and I know when I can get back.
Okay. Not sure if there was anything else for today.
There is.
Someone is actually right.
So let me share my screen again. I think the same window. And let's see, I can close these tabs. We've talked about them. So I want to talk about a migration issue 2687849, which is to add back rollbacks through the user interface. So let me demonstrate this. I have a Drupal 7 site, which, as you can see, I've used the devel generate module to generate some sample content. And then I also have the Drupal 9 site that I was showing before, which is just a fairly freshly installed Drupal 9 site with no content on it. Right? Absolutely no content. And under config development upgrade, I think that's an odd place to put it, but that's out of scope. This is where it's not quite a fresh site install. I've enabled the migrate modules, so I can migrate from Drupal 7 site, and I've prepared by importing the Drupal 7 database. So if we click through the screens in the upgrade process, hope I can remember all of these. This was D7DB, and the database name was database, and the username and password were very secure. Review upgrade, password manager go away. Very long confirmation step. We've discussed that before, not today. There's a bunch of stuff that won't be migrated and a bunch of stuff that will be migrated. Again, those are all subjects for another day. I just want to go ahead and import whatever migrated content I will at this point. And get to the point of the current issue, which is being able to undo all of these things that are being imported at this point. And I suppose I should prepare this site by making all of the files available to the migration. It would be nice if it were faster, but it's doing a lot of work. And I see, Christina, you just added yet another issue that you'd like us to look at. So,
yeah, just if we have time. Just I thought that there wasn't anything else.
well, we've either skipped meetings or ended them halfway through frequently in the last few months. I'm excited to be back to having plenty of stuff to talk about. Okay, so we've migrated our site. Although I guess the user interface talks about upgrading Drupal. We've upgraded our Drupal 7 site to our Drupal 9 site. We could look at the log, but I think what I want to do at this point is go back to the upgrade page, development upgrade. And at this point, A few blocks have been added to the 7 theme, but again, that's not what I want to talk about today. It's kind of peculiar. If I return to the upgrade page, I have these two options now: an incremental upgrade, and that was something that was fixed fairly recently. That if I've updated my database, or if I've enabled additional modules, I can rerun the upgrade process and get additional content. So that's great. But the issue I'm talking about today is this rollback option, which isn't there except that I've applied the patch. So the message is remove content and configuration entities, such as fields and node types. Default values of other configuration will not be reverted, such as site name. So I guess the main usability question here is that message and the fact that some things will not be reverted, such as the site name. I'm not entirely sure why there are some exceptions. I guess it's because some things have default values that won't be changed. But that's sort of the new feature introduced by this issue, that we now have the ability to remove all of this content that we've migrated. Previously, the only option was to, I guess there were two options. You could either start from scratch, do a fresh site install, and then you'd be back to where you were. Or if you were cautious enough to make a database backup before you started the migration process, which of course is a good idea, you could restore from the backup. But now you have the option of just through the admin UI to roll back all of the content and most of the configuration that was added in the migration process. So questions, comments? Can the message be improved? Is it too confusing? Should we work harder at figuring out what configuration will and will not be rolled back?
I think a list would be nice if there's an option to add that, but I'm not really sure what are the limits. I mean, what's the info that we have here? I don't know.
So you think it's a problem that this is too vague, that there's not enough information here to be actionable?
Yes, yeah, the thing is that, I mean, I assume this is a really huge change if you're really on a important, well, maybe if you're just testing something, it's not important, but if you're really on a production site or something like that, I don't know. It's just that, I don't know, depends. Feels like you're just seeing the content here. You're not seeing like a list or something else. Like, I don't know. What if you have 200, I don't know, whatever the content is below that. So like a summary or something would be super nice, I think. But again, I don't know which is the data that we have available here.
Right, so all content, I guess this is the technical distinction. Configuration entities will be rolled back. But other configuration will not be rolled back.
So there is this info here then, you mean?
Right. So
Yep, I mean, it's vague. It's not specific to this specific drawback, I guess.
and I think there's actually already a follow-up issue logged to add documentation. So there's a separate issue to create a documentation page, which would explain this further. And once we've added that page, we'll presumably add a link to the admin UI to the new page. So is that acceptable to, I think that would certainly help, and that would be the right place to spell out what the distinction is between configuration entity and other configuration. So is it acceptable to postpone that to a follow-up issue, and will that be good enough?
I'm not really sure what this issue specifically introducing. I guess if it could help just doing that into another issue, I wouldn't have any problem at all. And especially because it's just my opinion, and if someone has any other one, it would be great to just discuss it. But basically, I'm not really sure what's this one introducing, so I would say +1 to this. I don't know. Just that it's not a strong opinion, it's just that a suggestion, let's say it like that. So it makes sense to just either make a follow-up or I don't know.
Yeah, that follow-up is already there to add the documentation. I guess for the recording, the issue number is 2947498, which is marked postponed on the current issue.
But documentation is outside. So documentation is just text explaining how rollbacks work or something like that. It's not specific about the data that that specific rollback that is going to happen have. Although I'm not really sure if that would be super useful anyway, but I don't know. I mean, this issue, this documentation issue, it's improving what it's in there. It's just not what I'm saying. Not sure if I'm explaining myself. Anyway, I'm okay with the changes that I'm seeing here.
Okay. Any other opinions? I guess one thing I'll do after this meeting is update the documentation issue and add a comment saying that in particular, we have to be very clear about this distinction between configuration entities and other configuration.
Okay. I don't have any other feedback for this. So.
Okay. Anyone else?
Hey, sorry, I joined later, just there, and so I'm just trying to get some content, just getting a handle on what we're looking at here. But it looks like it's not so much the UI text we're looking at, or is it more just the actual documentation on Drupal.org?
The documentation on Drupal.org will be updated in a follow-up issue after after this issue is fixed, or at least that's the current plan.
Okay, so this is around like the UI text for on this page.
Yes.
And is it that are we trying to make the text where we're trying to provide more information on the interface here?
So this issue adds the functionality described in this rollback option.
Ah, okay.
So previously, the only options after doing a migration, if you wanted to get rid of content, the only options were either to start from scratch with a fresh site install, or restore from a backup if you were cautious enough to make the backup beforehand. So now we have the option of removing all of the migrated content.
Okay, so did the functionality already exist, or is this issue adding the actual logic that does that, or is it just adding UI?
This issue is adding the rollback option through the UI.
Okay.
Previously, it was possible using Drush, but not with the UI.
Well, I'm +1 to exposing in the UI, so that's good. And all the surrounding stuff on the page here is that the stuff that would normally be there, like the stuff below the continue button?
Yes, all of that stuff is sort of odd, but out of scope for this issue. And what happens is that when we do the upgrade, block configuration gets copied over, and for some reason, these sort of front-end blocks like the who's online and the forum blocks are enabled for the back-end theme.
Oh, that is amusing. Okay.
Yeah, that seems terrible, but it's out of scope.
Yeah, I was very confused as to what this. I presumed it had something to do with the migration. Maybe it was some content, so that it makes sense if it's content, those things.
In fact,
but
in another window, I have opened the block config for the 7 theme, and
yeah, it does look fairly broken.
New forum topics, recent comments, all of these front-end facing blocks are enabled for the 7 theme. That's what's going on. It is terrible, and it is out of scope.
Is this coming from, like, if you do a migration from Drupal 7 to 8 or 9, for instance, so you get this weird block configuration?
Yes, that's exactly what I've done here.
That's really interesting. Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah. All else aside, like, yeah, it's terrible that happens, but like super interesting.
I will make sure that there's an issue for that. I suspect there already is one.
Note that Aaron says super interesting.
You'll have to add that comment yourself.
Fair enough. Okay, well, I think that the text, if we're just zoning in on the rollback option here, I think the text is, it seems, I'll prefix what I'm about to say by I am a Drupal person, but to me, I understand what, from looking at this text, it gives me a sense of what will happen. I presume you can't, I was going to say, I presume you can't roll back a rollback, but rolling back a rollback is just to redo the migration. So perhaps end up with an even more ugly looking block configuration.
You're not guaranteed to get back to exactly the same state that you currently have. If that's what you want, you need to make a database backup. But yes, you can roll back and then run the upgrade again.
Oh, I see. So the block configuration would remain in the weird state. What I mean, do we have any? Okay, so if we're going to be doing more documentation, you know, more broader documentation around this rollback, or presumably if some does exist, do we know what more would be said? Because obviously it would be good to say more. I'm just thinking if we have an idea of what is already there, um, part of me says that we should either there should be more here, or it should link off to a docs page that has more information.
The docs page hasn't been written yet. It's a follow-up issue to the current one to add that
Okay.
documentation page. We didn't want to document something that wasn't yet implemented.
Well, I'm wondering if we have a would it be prudent to have the have a link in this patch there, so that that's already committed, because then you're going to have to effectively also then go in and commit another another commit to add the link to the documentation, should we choose to add a link here, although that may not be a problem. I'm just wondering if it makes sense to have a link already there. That
Well, we don't want to link to a page that doesn't exist or is unpublished. Maybe the answer is that we should not treat it as a follow-up issue, that we should treat it as part of the same issue. And then,
yeah, I wonder if the risk of treating it as a follow-up is that then, like, it's so directly related to what's happening here that the risk of treating it as a follow-up is that maybe it doesn't get done and you end up with like this feature in 9.2, but like there's no documentation around it other than what's there, or at least there's no link off to any documentation. Normally I'm a fan of follow-ups and breaking up issues, but this kind of thing seems like a pretty, like, there's certain things that are pretty like a rollback is a in terms of what that does is a pretty I'm trying to find, I can't think of the right words here, but it's a pretty like concrete change that you probably want to know as much about before doing a rollback. I guess maybe not. Maybe the most of the use cases for doing a rollback are on a site that is still very much in just the early stages of being built. So you probably aren't going to be doing a rollback on a live site, But I think in terms of what is there, that is probably, for me at least, the text that's there does a good job at describing what the rollback is going to do.
okay, well, I think it's not unreasonable to create the documentation page in advance. Say at the top. So first of all, we don't add it to the documentation guide. So in practice, no one will ever find it. If someone does manage to find it, then we have a message at the top saying that this is still in development.
Yeah.
And then we can include the link in the patch. And when the issue is committed, we publish the change record and we add the page to the menu of the documentation guide. I think that's a reasonable approach to do it all in one issue.
Certainly, I think from memory, there is functionality in the docs site to support doing that. Just in terms of what people see, like I have seen other pages that are like you might consider in development that are, not yet or need expanding, and there's like a yellow box that appears at the top or something.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a specific option for not yet implemented or vaporware.
Okay.
There are certainly options for out of date or incomplete.
Yeah, that's incomplete. That's what I was thinking of. Which is, I guess, would be accurate for in this this case of a page. It was just created. It is technically incomplete if we haven't filled it with content yet.
Okay, so I will comment on the issue that that we should not treat the documentation as a follow-up, that we should do it all in one issue. And I will specifically mention that the documentation should be very clear about the distinction between configuration entities and other configuration. Is there anything else?
I think that maybe an example of what other configuration means in this context is I think there's, we've got there, for instance, removes content and configuration entities such as fields and node types. Although maybe that wording, like such as, because the thing that I think the thing that it might be worth saying is like fields, nodes and node types, like I don't know, I'm thinking of things that are most likely to be the most relevant things that people will be thinking in their minds. And then like default values of other configuration, like such as, I don't know, and maybe that means site name, like I'm presuming that means simple configuration. So like site name, site email address.
Right. Yeah, I think we can trust the people working on the issue to spell that out. But the main decision here is that we have to do the documentation as part of the same issue.
I think so. At least get something going, because yeah, it seems like a pretty concrete. The word, there's this word. It's on the tip of my tongue, and I really can't remember what it is. The word I'm trying to think of.
Any other opinions? No. I guess Christina has dropped, so Ofer, any opinions on this issue?
No, nothing to add.
Okay. So let's not try to fill up the remaining 4 minutes in the hour. Thank you for participating. And Christina mentioned in Slack another issue that she'd like to talk about. I will add that to the issue for next week's meeting. So thank you, and hope to talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Benji.